Hello, anybody there?
Hello.
Hey, there you are.
Finally.
It's happening. I was starting to think that this meeting was going to be cursed because
That's
we.
what you know what? I thought the same thing. I'm like, what is going on between not being able to sign in, scores, like I said, I'm so happy to finally be able to take this call.
A long time coming, but really excited
Yes.
to get to catch up for a little bit to see where you're coming
Man.
from. So if you got a few minutes, you wanna give this a shot, and we can start at the beginning if you like.
That's perfect.
Awesome. So tell me where you're from, where are you at, and where does your story begin?
Okay, so I'm from Blackhawk, Mississippi. I've lived here my entire life of 30 years. As far as writing goes, if that's the question that you're asking about, the story, as you said, I feel like I've been writing my entire life. Started as a young kid. I used to write poetry a lot, and then as I grew older, I really fell more so in love with prose. I just loved having the time and the space to create and play with whatever my imagination came up with. And so that's really just been like my main love for years now, close to 10 years of writing truly prose at this point in my life.
Yeah. What kind of stuff were you into when you were younger? Were you reading anything in particular that made you excited about storytelling?
Yes. One kind of story that really comes to mind is I was really into Greek mythology as a child. Um, there was just something about that form that really drew me in because it was so otherworldly, and yet the way that it could be applied to real life in a sense, just some of the characteristics, some of the lessons fascinated me because it was seeing that kind of genre, the way that it utilized just magic and mythology, showing that it wasn't too far away from just our everyday lives. And I thought there was just something really cool in that stories that obviously weren't real based on real life, but stories that utilize that sort of form could bring in a reader, our audience in that way and give it so much depth and so much exploration. I always thought of it as something that was really freeing. And so even today, I'm really drawn to adding in little touches of strange or mythology or even horror because I think it's a very interesting way to draw a person in.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you were first getting into writing and looking around at your community, what was the relationship there between this draw of mythology and the world that you were living in when you were younger? Like, what was it like growing up where you are?
Blackhawk is very interesting. Again, I've lived here my whole life, and so Mississippi, I think, is just very interesting because we have so many different types of regions. You have where I live at, which is Blackhawk, Mississippi, and it's very rural and it's very hilly and it's very forested. And then you have places like the Delta where it's just miles and miles and miles of truly flat land. And so for me, because I was drawn to those sort of fantastical types of stories, Blackhawk was a very almost perfect place to live in because in itself it felt very otherworldly to me. And it's really interesting because you'll have people who have lived here their entire lives, in Mississippi, that is, and then they'll come to places like here, like Blackhawk, for the first time, and it's astounding to them because, again, a lot of Mississippi is very flat. It's very, it's kind of easy to figure out, and you get to Blackhawk, and it doesn't even necessarily feel like a place that should be here in Mississippi because of just the terrain and such. So when I write and when I think of Blackhawk, it feels like a space and an opportunity to really play up some of the genres that I really like, which again is horror, fantasy, science fiction, because if my home uh, can have this sort of otherworldliness to it too, and this sort of fantasy element to it too.
Mm,
My stores for sure can. And so
yeah.
this setting plays such a big role in my creative process because, it's beautiful to look at. And the more I study it and explore, because even with me, I'll drive down a road or somewhere different that I've never been before, and it's in Blackhawk, or it can be other neighboring like counties, and it's something I've never seen before, a house I've never noticed before, and I've driven by it like, hundreds of times. So drawing on that energy is always such a fun and very freeing process to me, because
Mhm.
just having that opportunity alone means that I have the chance to just really play up the creative element.
So tell me of the kinds of things that you were writing when you first started. Like, what were your first projects like that were the source, or maybe the initial spark of your creative perspective? That blended these things together.
I want to say, okay, I'm trying to think now. That's a really good question. Um, okay, if we're talking about like where I'm at right now, how I got to where I'm at right now with some of the things that I like to write, it more than likely was grad school that
Mm,
I really felt that I could um, write in the ways that I do. I've been writing my whole life, but I really honestly truly think that it does take a while to actually craft and create the voice that that you seek. And even when you do find it, you're always working on it. So when I got to grad school, I knew that I obviously I knew that I wanted to be a writer, but I think that the ideas that were underlying in me didn't really show up and come out until I started working with my beloved professors at Mississippi University for Women,
mm,
and just they would, particularly my teacher Chris Lee, he would read my work and he would write notes, handwritten notes on drafts, and tell me, hey, pay attention to this, or you should be reading this person. And the more that I started working towards it, and the more that I read, that's when I started thinking again about home and all of the unexpected elements that it had. And then thinking about childhood with the Greek mythology, and why that fascinated me so much. And so now it's just basically taking a lot of that magic that held me, but also just looking forward in the everyday life, in the everyday people, and the everyday settings. And so again, like the more I just really started thinking about those things and exploring them, the more I was able to feel a lot more secure with what I wanted to create.
right. So, can you tell me a little bit about that college experience then? Because it seems like that was the thing that opened things up for you, and it wasn't going to through your bachelor's education, but you got into grad school, and that's when things really started clicking for you. Then.
Yes. Um, I continue to say this, but I always think about it. I have been writing my whole life. I always knew that I wanted to write. Throughout elementary, throughout high school, my undergrad experience was also very excellent too. But I was very young and uh, without much of the confidence that I have right now. My teachers there were incredible, and they were very catering in the same way that grad school was. Grad school was just a step up
Mm-hmm.
in a different direction, because even in undergrad, my advisor, Dr. Zine, he was the one to suggest going to Mississippi University for Women. It was a brand new program at the time. It hadn't even, started yet. So I was one of the first people to be with the very first class at Mississippi University for Women. And
Wow.
so when I into the program, and we workshopping and, you know, sort of academic writing too, and just undergoing that process, it took what I felt like was good writing at the time. But I was very raw and not as disciplined as I am now, and
Mm-hmm.
just again allowed me to think of the element of craft and how it does take time to create really good work. And so while undergrad was about catering and just basically creation and having teachers who really saw what I was trying to do, undergrad was taking that and just sort of chiseling away at the excess.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my experience with both my undergrad, which was at Mississippi Valley State University and HBCU, and then Mississippi University for Women.
Mm-hmm. So when you were at that point, when you were getting to study a particular degree, did you have any hesitations or reservations about studying writing and going into that, or was there any pushback from family where they said, what are you doing here? Or were you able to kind of manage it in a more realistic expectation sort of way and say, oh, well, I'm going to pair it with this, or I'm going to do this? What was that like for
Yes.
you?
Yes. For sure. On a parental level, my dad was very concerned, in the ways that parents are, because, it's not a very, just sort of one and done kind of thing being a writer. It's not predictable at all. It's very much dependent on other people a lot. And he had wanted me to go into healthcare, which would not have worked because my math skills, oh my goodness, like I can't tell you. But my mom saw my drive and my passion for it, and she encouraged me. And I once my dad started seeing what I was doing and started reading some of my work, and he saw what so many other people saw in me now, that aided me so well. And he began to become a lot more confident in what I was trying to do. So, of course, I had reservations a little bit too because, you're young and, you want to be secure in your future. You want to make sure you're making right decisions. But I honestly couldn't see myself doing anything else.
Yeah.
And I just decided to do the best that I could and just try to work smart in the ways that I could. And so I utilized the support that I had to do the best work that I could. I talked to a lot of my professors. I studied, other writers and what they did. And so, I honestly truly believe that anybody can do anything. It might take time. It might not go in the ways that you want it to, but, when you don't mind putting in the work because you truly enjoy it and it feels, it just feels natural.
Mm-hmm.
I always feel that it will work out in the ways that it needs to work out. And usually that's for your best interest. So,
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. So, speaking of the post-college life, I liken it to a wilderness. You're in a very safe environment when you're in college or you're in grad school,
Mm-hmm.
and you're then thrust into this new space that has very little regard for anything except capitalism or except we got to make money, you got to survive, and all this
Yes.
kinds of stuff. Was that a kind of a reality check? Because I remember when I left school, it literally felt like I just dove off a cliff and I had no idea what I was doing, even though I had spent quite a few years, entrenched in my passion, in my work. You come out on the other side and then you're like, okay, now I have to really, I guess, grapple with the realities of
Yes.
the world. So what was that like for you, and how did you work your way through that?
Oh my goodness. I particularly had that feeling after undergrad because, mind you, it was maybe close-ish to 2 years before Mississippi University for Women opened up the MFA program. And so for a full year, I was just, doing a random work, just to make money. And
Yeah.
I didn't know what I wanted to do with that bachelor's. I knew that I didn't really want to teach because the way that I am, I felt like I could not have done both and done a good job. If I taught, I don't think I would want to write. And I say that because I in my mind I held myself up to the standards of my undergrad teachers at the time who were incredible. I mean,
Yeah.
they truly, they cared, and they went above and beyond in ways that, a lot of teachers can't afford to, because it's exhausting, I would think.
Uh-huh.
The many different roles that teachers play. I mean, truly, they're amazing people. And so if I wanted to be like that, if I wanted to be that kind of teacher, I said to myself that, well, I can't write because I don't have the capacity to explore both
Right.
at full intensity with the same level of passion. Something would have had to be sacrificed. So I said, okay, I don't think I want to teach. Maybe that'll be something I do later on in life, but not right now. So for a full year and a half, I felt like I was playing around because I'm like, I got this English creative writing degree. I'm not really writing too much. I thought about applying to grad school, but in fields that were completely different from, my initial undergrad bachelor's degree. And it was such a jarring feeling because, you just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
That safety of undergrad where you write a good paper, you get told you did a good job, you get good grades, and that consistent scheduling of it was so comforting. Mm-hmm. And so now to have been thrusted out of that, into, the quote unquote real world, and now you just well, what do I do? And then writing even felt a little bit unfamiliar because, again, at the end of the day, even when I wrote, which was at that point after graduation, it wasn't a whole lot.
Uh-huh.
I don't have a teacher telling me that this is a good story. Mm-hmm. I don't have any classmates, reading it and, making notes and saying, hey, I really like this. It's just you. Mm-hmm. So when that year and a half pretty much passed up and Dr. Zine reached out to me and told me about the program, I did feel a lot of relief because, again, I was entering, I would be potentially entering a world that was very familiar and safe. And, I have my teachers and I have my classmates and I have a schedule now. And to not feel like that degree was wasted. So I got that relief back. But then when I entered grad school, I started thinking a lot of things differently because when I knew that when my time was done there, I wanted to be more sure and more set and more secure in what I would do afterwards. Mm-hmm. So, I approached it with wanting and intending to be a better writer, but also what can I do with that that felt, natural to me.
Yeah.
And not going back to that feeling of flailing and just, again, seeking outside degrees that had nothing to do with what I, needed or wanted to do. So,
yeah.
I think it's just such a common thing. And if I had to go back, I don't know if I would. Some things require you actually just having being brave enough to actually find out on your own. So I don't know if things would have worked out the way that they did, the way that they have now. Mm-hmm. But, for advice for anybody, my thing is always just not being afraid to talk to people, not being afraid to just have basic ideas that you would like to do and the best way to go about them. And, people, whether they're novice or experts are here to you would hope, give their opinion and give their advice. So making use of that is very important, I believe.
Yeah.
And also being very flexible and definitely patient.
Absolutely. And I think, honestly, if there's anything to take away from a creative life, it's that you have it in you to be as patient as you need to be, to adapt and to pick up new things. And that's something that as I navigate through, as we say, quote unquote, the real world, people have a lot of difficulty with that. And, especially during my time, I used to help people find work. And so I was a workforce specialist and I did a lot of that. And change is very difficult for people. Adapting to things is very difficult. And so one of the most beautiful benefits of this kind of creative life is that inherent drive to to do the best you can with what you have. I feel like that's almost a philosophy of all writers, right? Where you're like, I'm going to make time for this. I'm going to make it work, right? No matter what. And so it seems like for you, you've always had that resolve. Like it's not really been a problem. It's just sort of figuring out the mechanics of how you're going to make it work, right? So,
Yes.
so fitting in, say, work and life and the creative pursuit, how do you find time for that right now? Like what do your habits look like in terms of how you're approaching these things?
Okay. Um, okay, I say this all the time. Much as I love writing, it's not something that I honestly do every day. And one of the reasons that is because for me, it's not something that I wish to go about with the intention of finishing as soon as I can, because as soon as I think of it in that way, it becomes less about the journey and more about the finished product. So right now I'm at this current sweet spot where if I wanted to write faster, I could, but I'm not under any like contract obligations. I'm able to work with my agent and we can take our time with it. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's really truly about finding a process that feels very natural to you. I'm not a fast writer at all. I'm a very slow writer, though.
No, me too. I laugh because I agree.
I just finished a story, and it's not even like extremely long. It's about a little over 7,000 words, but I started it in November, and I literally just finished the last draft this week. So it's for me, like what my day to day is like. I will work on, because I love to use like sections a lot in my long form short stories. So it'll be like a lot of times it'll have like Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, Act 4. If I were to break that down, I would work on Act 1 just for 1 week, and then I'll move on to Act 2 the next week, and so on and so forth. And a lot of times it's usually just an hour session, maybe 3 or 4 times out of the week, because of other things that, you wish to get done. You're trying to have balance with your work. You're trying to, make sure you eat good meals and drink your water and work out and, things that also give your life meaning and fulfillment too. And so, it's so funny that you talked about this, because I was watching a Donna Tartt interview just yesterday. She's one of my favorite writers, and she talked about trying to write faster and not really enjoying it. And so she's just this writer who has, I believe, solely only writes novels, and she finishes one novel averaging every 10 years. And when she talked about that, I felt so seen, because I want to have time with the work. I want to have fun with the work. I want to, I want to feel like this journey is just as meaningful as when it's done and it's on somebody's bookshelf or in a bookstore. Like, I don't want to have any resentment in that creative process. And so I really think that, for me, having that time to just take my time is really treasurable.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of the pressure off too, I would say.
No, I agree.
Because, at the end of the day, no one, I'm not Stephen King. I'm not somebody who's this is my main bread and butter. So why not take that time? Why not actually enjoy it? Because I can. Because
Absolutely.
I can.
And, I appreciate that perspective a lot, because in this day and age, I fall into the trap of wanting to have more output. I'm typically generally rushing a lot of the time. I'm trying to work through something. And I find that a lot of that might be attributed to social media. Of course, I fall into that rat race of wanting to produce content. So I always have something to share, something to let people know about. And it's so detrimental, because just a quick thing, and I'll ask you a question, but I'm working on the Dramatists Guild End of Play Challenge, which is write something for the month of April. And it's one of those challenges where, like, I'm throwing everything that I have at it when I'm not podcasting or doing my other commitments. And I feel like it's still not fast enough for what I have in my head, for my expectation. And I realize halfway through, I'm not enjoying any of this. This is torture. Why? Because I remember that I don't write like that. And for a moment, I was thoroughly convinced that I would magically have a play by the end of April when,
Yeah.
I still have a lot of work to do. But I just think that you're tapping onto something so special because it's very hard to maintain your mindset. And I'm talking about your way of looking at things because we're just bombarded with this need to go, go, go. And I just have to applaud you for that. It's very difficult.
It is. And I still struggle with it now because I'll look at, writers, submission stats and acceptance stats and like their acceptances in 1 month, equate to mine for the entire year.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, how do you write that much? Like, do you get tired of it or anything like that? But I think that's important is to really also pay attention to like just how you feel, because if you start leaning towards that like feeling that's very anxious, that's very insecure, that's very resentful, that makes it feel like truly a burdensome test, then I feel like this like straying away because prior to social media and prior to all the stakes that are out there, a lot of times the craft that we enjoy, whether it be writing or something else, was something that we just did purely for the enjoyment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that what's important as we get older is to hold on to that, like that sort of youthfulness in that playtime of creating, but also applying it, with the experience and the expertise and the wisdom that you have, as an adult. Mm-hmm. And so, for me, I'm always saying, just make sure that you're having a good time with what you do, but don't let that mean, that doesn't mean that you slack off in what you do. Like you can be playful, but you can also be the playful expert. And more often than not, like that just takes time. We read some of the classic books that we read, Zora Neale Hurston or Toni Morrison. Those works are good because they took time to write. And if we hold ourselves to that same standard, we have to be sort of unafraid in that time that it takes to write. I mean, you can always reward yourself in other ways if we are wanting to feel good, if we're wanting to feel special. I do something like I'll set up like a very maintainable rewards list for like, small writing goals and big writing goals.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives me that sort of validation and excitement that I'm looking for. And another thing is that, if you want to write a good book or a good story and it takes you time to do that, that's cool. But if you want that feeling of reading one or writing one right now, there's plenty of other writers that you could read and support that give you that same feeling too while you work on your stuff. So, I think that we will always continue to work towards and on our relationship with writing, but it definitely goes back to just being very honest about what it is that makes you feel good and secure.
Absolutely. So one quick question about process here, because I like this idea of enjoying the hard work, like finding the pleasure in problem solving a sort of a mechanical problem in the story that you're working on. Can you give me an example of maybe a recent work or something you did in the past where you said this was incredibly difficult to solve in terms of storytelling, but I felt so rewarded by the effort that I put in, no matter how long it took? Do you remember an experience like that?
Oh yes, I can talk about a story. It's not published yet, but it's become what I like to call my little good luck story. So about let me see, last year, I'm confusing the years. The years are going by so fast. So last year was 2022. Okay, so in fall of 2022, I had an idea for a story that played a lot with science fiction, literary fiction, and it was a story that I wanted to do a social commentary on that sort of blended Black culture and also the culture of bees. And it was something that took a lot of research and a lot of time and a lot of, oh my goodness, a lot of like hard questions that I had to ask about myself, about us, Black people, about society, about gender roles, all of that. And I did not finish. I started in October 2022, and I did not finish until October 2023, so a full year. And it was a story that as soon as I wrote the first draft, I knew it was going to take me time because I was presenting something that I felt was very deep. And the deeper the thematics are, more often than not, the more time it's going to take to actually do, at least for me. So while and it wasn't the only thing that I worked on because I had other things, other projects that were easier to figure out, I guess you could say. Mm-hmm. But it took time. It took time for me to really just get it to where it is now. And it was a story that one of the drives for me was I really wanted to submit it to a contest. I had this one of my favorite publications. I wanted to send it to it, and I did. But funnily enough, that story got rejected from that contest. However, the same time, my now agent Danielle was able to read it. It was the story that one of the stories she got to read, and that I sent her, and I knew that I wanted her to see me and see what I was trying to do, and if it's a very strange and surreal and pretty heavy story, and so it was sort of like saying, hey, this is who I am. If you feel it, you feel it. If you don't, you don't. At least I know, at least I wasn't hiding what I wanted to create in the future. And I didn't have any expectations at all because I know as a writer, you know how it is. Some people love it, some people don't. I just thought it was cool to be able to do something, to be able to query my first agent, period. And it ended up working out. And so I think that without having, if I had not gave that story the time that it needed, I don't know how things would have played out. But I do know that when we have these topics that are very heavy and it's like, as soon as you write the first sentence and it's like, oh Lord, this is gonna take some time. that's the treasure. That's when you should lean in even more and be excited because that's gonna be the big prize for you. Whether it's just the idea of you finishing it or leading on to other great things. But yeah, being unafraid of a story that may take time to finish, or a novel that may take time to finish, or a memoir or whatever, it's always best to try to not be intimidated by that if you can, and just think of it as, oh, okay, this is the big one. And when you start thinking of it as the big one, you don't mind that time at all that it takes to finish. And by the time it's done, you'll feel it's just a great feeling, period.
That's an awesome perspective. And it leads me to ask you on your latest work that's coming out. This is going to be a big year for you. I know that you have your fiction chapbook that's coming out real soon, and you also have your collection of essays. Is that right? That's coming out in the summer?
Yes, in May 20. Yes, May 20th. I'm sorry.
Oh goodness. Yeah, so it's coming fast.
It is. It's really literally right around the corner.
Yeah, early congratulations on that. But I'm curious, what preparations have to go into this? It seems like you're very close to having this project see the light of day.
Yes. That is a really good question because I feel like I'm a good writer, but I feel like one of the things I had to work on coming out of grad school was being better at the preparations, as you say. So, I was never the one to like set up a writer's page, and I literally just got my author website established last fall. I'm terrible at it. It's a weakness, I'll admit, but other people are really on top of their game. So when I got the acceptances for both, it was very much so exploring the more business side of writing,
Mm,
because I had to review proofs and, calling bookstores to try to set up readings and thinking about book covers and checking if each, it like I'm talking about my essay collection right now,
mm,
checking to see if it was okay to use certain pieces. And actually, one of them, which was published with Chicken Soup for the Soul, was not okay to publish in a different book outside of what they had published already. And
mm.
so, my advice is always to just, you know, if you're publishing like with a independent press, to always try to be on top of your stuff. Ask the editors questions about how to prepare. Think about what book cover you might, like have in mind and who you'd like to work with. Make sure that none of the pieces, as far as being published go, if they're published individually, make sure that that publication schedule doesn't conflict with your book debut schedule. I had a essay that's literally the first piece in the book. It's to come out with Friction in June of 2023, so this summer, and my book comes out in May. And I thought to myself, oh Lord, like, what am I going to do? Like,
Mm.
so I contacted them, and thankfully, Friction is such an amazing and wonderful and generous staff. They allowed me to still publish the essay in spite of like their contract. So I was
Mm.
given permission to do that. So these little tiny things that, they're all important, and it's not extremely difficult. It's just requiring kind of having to shift your mind from that creative side to that more business side.
Yeah, and it goes to emphasize the importance of communication throughout this whole process and being open, not coming from a guarded place. And obviously, one has to be careful if this is a business, but to still be open enough to communicate before other
Yes,
problems arise. It seems like that's a very important thing to do.
yes. And I think a wonderful thing about being in a creative community is that even when it is business, most people care.
Mm,
And so, like with things like with my issue of the essay conflicting with my debut book and the dates and all of that, people cared enough to make that acceptance. And so, it's really honestly nothing to be like ashamed or afraid of, asking questions about, because typically, what my experience at least, most editors and readers, they're just like us, and they want to see us do good, and they're
mm,
proud of us. And so,
yeah,
yes, it's the kind of business that I feel like most writers would do well,
right.
to do with.
Yeah.
It's not anything like too out of our wheelhouse, I don't think.
No, it seems like there's a good bunch of people surrounding you, so that's really uplifting to see. And I have to commend you as well on the title of your fiction chapbook because it's a badass title. It is lovely, and I love these very involved, very, some might say verbose, but I think it's so beautiful. And correct me if I'm wrong, this is look at all the little hurts of these newly broken lives and the bittersweet, sweet, and bitter loves. That's
Yes, that's
amazing.
right.
That makes
Thank
my heart
you.
soar. It's incredible. Can you
Thank
talk?
you so much.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about it just to give us a cliff notes or maybe just a little
Yeah.
sample of what we're in for with this one?
Yeah. So one thing that's interesting, and I actually haven't talked about this ever, is that I love long titles, period. But this title is it's almost like two titles in one,
Mm,
because the chapbook is almost two collections in one. So the first half, look at all the little hurts of these newly broken lives. It features five micro to flash fiction stories of this family that's no longer a family anymore. And
mm,
the five stories cover a perspective from an orange sitting in the kitchen watching the dismantling of this family, and then the father and the mother and the son, and the final story out of the five goes back to the orange. And then the bittersweet, sweet, and the bitter love. Those are individual, various love stories too. And again, either they'll be bittersweet, or they'll be straight up sweet, or they'll be somewhere, just straight up bitter. And I was really excited about it because I love writing about romance a lot. Not necessarily in a very sweeping and buff guy with his shirt off on a horseback type of way. Although I've read that too before, because they can be nice to just sort of
Mm-hmm.
have a nice especially when you're writing something heavy, something soft at the end of the day to sort of take your mind off those sort
Yeah,
of
we
things.
need breaks.
But yes, all the time. But I love writing about it because I feel like that romance, that love is at the root of a lot of the stories that are famous and beautiful and well known now. And so I'm always figuring out a way to write about it. I love talking about relationships and what people will do to keep one another, or falling out of love, and all of these things. And so that chapbook is sort of like, I'm really happy and proud of it because it feels like the proper debut for me,
Mm-hmm.
because that topic of love is something that I plan to explore pretty much for the majority of my career.
That's beautiful, and I'm very much looking forward to that one. But I'm curious of how the structure is going to be informed by that two-part or two halves kind of situation that you have there. It's going to be pretty awesome. Now, I just got one more question to be mindful of your time, because I know that we're going to make this a quick one, but when things are exciting and things are interesting, that never happens. So thank you so much, Exodus, for saving the episode and joining me today, even though we had a change of schedule. But
no problem at all. It's been such a pleasure and such a privilege.
So can I ask you if you could impart some things to a younger creative, maybe somebody from your neck of the woods, who's from your area? What do they need to keep going? What is it that you would say to uplift them, to commit to their craft and continue, especially a young person of color who may experience some adversity in their perspective and in the way that they see the world? If you could share a few things on that.
I would say to not think about the stakes too much. I think that when we think about what's at risk, am I going to get famous? Am I going to get published? Are people going to love this? It creates such a big divide between us as the creator and our craft. So for me, and this is something that I feel like everybody should employ, it's going to take you spending time alone with that craft and not necessarily being afraid to make mistakes, because that's just how you begin. Nobody, whether it's writing or sewing or pottery or photography, no one starts out as the expert. We have our gifts, of course. We have our talents. But even if we start off from a supremely talented place, the thing is that we're only going to get better. And the better that we get, the more time that it takes. And that time is very precious, because it's basically you and the craft in that relationship. And the way that relationship grows is by exploring that time, is by being unafraid to make mistakes. And so for me, when I was a much younger writer, what allowed me to get to where I am now is just having fun with it. And most importantly, and I'll say equally as importantly, actually, is listening to the people who see all the goodness that you have inside of you and all the goodness that you can do. Listening to that, because those voices are going to be the ones that fuel you and feed you day in and day out. And without my family and without my teachers and without my friends, I wouldn't have had the courage to explore in all the ways that I have. So having fun, being playful, being unafraid of the time that it takes and listening to the right people, that's the biggest, blessed, most amazing advice that I could give to anybody. And once you apply that, you can pretty much try any craft that you want, knowing that that's all the secrets that it takes to go from novice to expert in your own right.
And that is an amazing note to end on. So, Exodus, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to do this. And hopefully we'll be able to talk further down the road about your other activities and hobbies. I know that you're a budding beekeeper. That sounded pretty awesome, as well as a whole bunch of other things. But I want to thank you today for your willingness to be open today, to write about love and magic and all these beautiful things that keep us afloat in the world. And of course, for reminding us that it's about the journey and that we should love and embrace it. So this has been a real pleasure. And I hope that we get to chat soon, someday down the road.
Yes, same. I've truly enjoyed my time talking to you. It allowed me to think about my experiences as a writer almost from an outside perspective, because I know myself so well and I know my writing so well, but now that I was able to talk with you, it was such a different experience for me, and I've truly enjoyed that time and having this discussion with you as a fellow writer and editor and all of that.
Awesome. Well, congrats again on your latest release. I'm going to keep retweeting it and posting it no matter where I'm at. And I hope we get to chat again next time, okay?
Yes, for sure. Thank you so very much.
All right. You enjoy your Sunday, and I'll be in touch on the internet.
Okay, Jamie. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
You too. Bye.